We have just created a new file in working directory, file3.txt. And in the console, with git status command, we see that this file is untracked. And in order to start tracking it, we should use git add command. And it means that when you add any new files into working directory, those files will become automatically untracked. And you decide whether you want to track them or not. And now let's discuss different tracking statuses for every file and the lifecycle actually of every file. Please note that every file in Git may change its status multiple times. But by default, when you create new file, its status will be untracked. There is no status called tracked, but there are statuses called modified, staged, and unmodified. And we can say that file is tracked when it is either modified, staged, or unmodified. And let's now discuss different commands and actions that allow you to transition file from one state to another. And first transition is between untracked and staged state. And in order to move file from untracked state to staged state, you should use git add command. And with this command, you actually start tracking new file. And this file is copied from working directory into staging area. That's what you do with git add command. And that's why here in the console you see suggestion to use git add command to start tracking file. Again, this is relevant only to new files that are untracked. Okay. Next, when file is already staged, it is considered as tracked, we can commit this file. And in order to commit file, you should use git commit command. Of course, you usually commit multiple files and folders using single git commit command, because commit is just a wrapper around the tree object. And tree object may contain links to multiple subtrees or blobs. Okay. And when you enter git commit command and when there are files or file in staged area, those files after committing will transition to unmodified state. And if we will look at our current distribution of the files among different areas, we can say that file1.txt and file2.txt are now unmodified. They are present in all those areas: working directory, staging area, and Git repository. And that's why if I'll go to terminal and type git ls files-s, you'll see those files here in staging area. But we don't see any information about those files when we enter git status command. Those files are absent in this information block. And that's because those two files are unmodified. They were not changed since last commit. Okay, git commit command transitions state of the file from staged to unmodified. And in most cases, most files will have unmodified state. Okay, but what happens if you change specific file in working directory? What does it mean? For example, there are already files file1.txt and file2.txt that are currently unmodified. And I change, for example, file2.txt in working directory. And if I make any changes to the file that is already tracked, that is, for example, unmodified, it will transition its state to modified. And you'll see those changes with git status command. And in case when we will modify any of unmodified files, for example, file1.txt or file2.txt, you'll see here in git status output separate section modified files and list of modified files. No worries, we will try that soon. Okay, that's what happens when you make any changes in any unmodified file. It will transition to modified state. And when a file is modified, you can again use git add command and move this file into staging area, stage it. And when you will stage it, its status will transition from modified to staged. It means that with help of git add command, you can stage either untracked files or modified files. And finally, you can untrack files. If a specific file was already committed, you can untrack this file and move it from unmodified state to untracked state. But you may ask me, when do we need to untrack specific file or files? This may happen, for example, when you have added a certain file or files to your repository by mistake, and you have already committed those changes. And you could remove those files from your repository and make them again untracked. More than that, you can even ignore specific files or even folders, and if you ignore them, you will not even see them as untracked files here in git status output. We will talk about that later on in the course. For now, let's proceed. And now there is a file, file3.txt, located in working directory, but now it is untracked. And we should use git add command in order to change its status from untracked to staged. And let's do that in the next lecture. But before moving on, let me quickly summarize what we discussed in this lecture. There are 4 states in file lifecycle in Git: untracked, modified, staged, and unmodified. When you add new file into working directory, it becomes untracked. If you want to stage file or files, you should use git add command, and you could stage either untracked files or modified files. When there are files in staging area and you commit changes, all those files or file that were located in staging area and were staged move to unmodified state. And when file is unmodified, it will not be listed in output of git status command. And that's why here we don't see any information about file1.txt and file2.txt. They are now unmodified. Okay, if you change any file that is unmodified, it will transition to modified. And the modified files will be listed in separate section here in this output of git status. And finally, you can untrack unmodified files. Some of those operations when file changes its state have, let's say, opposite operation. What do I mean? For example, when file was modified and you have moved it to staged state with commit git add, you can unstage this file and move it back to modified state. And same for untracked files. When specific file was staged and before it was untracked, you can unstage it and make again untracked. But I didn't want to overcomplicate this diagram, that's why I didn't add those transitions here. And actually they are used not so often. Okay, let's go on, and next let's use git add command in order to stage this untracked file. I'll see you next. Bye.